Hey, it's Lucky. Today we're going to be building a third-person controller. I've shown a lot of third-person controllers in my project videos and gotten a lot of tutorial requests, so I thought I'd finally get around to it. There are a lot of different types of third-person controllers. The most common ones are the over-the-shoulder one, like Gears of War, PUBG, Fortnite, but you also have the over-the-head one, used in World of Warcraft, Dark Souls, and similar games. I'm going to be showing you how to build both. All the assets I used in this tutorial are linked down below in the description. First I'm going to show you how to set up the controller, and then I'm going to talk about some of the problems you're going to have to face when building third-person games. Alright, let's get started. Alright, the first thing you're going to need is this assets folder. It's going to be the first link in the description. In here you'll find the player model. It's from Mixamo. It will be the second link in the description. And textures from Kenny and Al. They're great debug, grid textures. I'll link his site as the third link. Go support him, he's awesome. Alright, let's set up the stage. So we'll open up Godot, create a new project. I'm going to be using the forward plus renderer. I'm going to drop this in my Godot 4 folder, creating a new folder, calling it third-person tutorial. You can name it whatever you want. Select current folder and create. So have that load up. And the first thing we're going to do is drop in our assets folder. So drag and drop the assets folder into the file system. It's going to import all the assets. Then let's create our world. So in our scene, we'll create a new 3D scene and call this world. In here, I'm going to right click the world node, click add child node, and add a node 3D. This is going to be our map. In here, I'm going to add a box, search for box, and add the CSG box. We're going to be using CSG shapes because they have easy collision. I'll show you in a second. Click create, and this is going to be our floor. So I'm going to set the size to 1000 meters by 1 meter by 1000 meters here in the top right. And I'm going to move it down by grabbing this top handle, holding down shift and control until it's on the world origin, so you can see the grid lines. Alright, let's apply a texture to this. So I'm going to go into my assets folder, textures, grids. I'm going to be using a dark grid for the floor, and I'm going to be using grid 5. So you can drag and drop that onto our box. You can see it's too big. We can change this by going into geometry on the right when selecting the box, clicking on the material, going down to UV and enabling triplanar. This is going to scale the texture to the size of the box. So now you can see every square is 1 meter by 1 meter. I'm going to rename this one to floor. And I'm also going to add a couple of boxes for reference. So on our map, right click, add child node, add another box. Again, holding down control and shift and grabbing the top handle. Drag it up so it's on the floor. Let's make this one orange box. I'm going to be using orange 9 here. Drop it on there. Oh, grab it and let's move it up to the side a little. Right there, rotate it. These are just for reference, so the scene looks a little more interesting. Let's click this box and hit Control D to duplicate it. And let's grab this little square right here and move it over. Let's make this one a little bigger, 2 by 2 by 2. Hold down Control and Shift and drag it up. Let's set a different material for this one. So in geometry, material override, click the little refresh icon. Let's make this one purple. I'll use purple 9. I am going to be enabling triplanar for this one. So click on the material again, UV1, enable triplanar. And let's do one more box. So click on the box, Control D to duplicate. Let's move it over here, rotate it a little again, go into geometry, refresh the material. Let's make this one green. Green 9. Drop it onto the box. Click the material. UV. Enable triplanar. And I'll make this one 3 by 3 by 3. And Ctrl Shift, drag it up. So now we got a couple of boxes, so our scene looks a little interesting. Let's rename these to just box, and we'll add a 2 at the end, box. And then for all of these, so click the floor, shift click the last box, enable collisions, so our player can collide with them. Next, I want to make the environment a little more interesting. And an environment is basically the lighting and the fog and the post-processing effects. And you can really easily add one by clicking these 3 dots at the top. And click Add Environment to Scene. We'll also add this sunlight. So click the 3 dots, add sun to scene. And now I'm going to click on my world environment, on the top right environment. And here we can change some settings. I'm going to be enabling the new global illumination, which is CGFGI. Enable that. And you can see you get some nice shadows coming in. I'll also enable some fog. So in the bottom, click fog, enable. I'm going to turn down the density to 0.005. I'm going to change the light to white. I'm actually going to turn down the intensity a little more. So it's like that. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, let's get into the player. I'll first set up some file organization. So in our file system, right click, new folder. Call it scenes. This will contain all our scenes. And create a new folder. Scripts, which will contain all our scripts. Now we can save this world scene. Ctrl S, scenes, and I'll call it main. And in the scenes folder, I'll create a new scene and call it player. The root type of the player is going to be a character body. So we'll click on this little icon next to root type and search for character body 3D. Click OK. And it's directly giving us an error. That's because it needs a collision shape. So let's add this. Right click the player node, add child node, collision shape 3D. And I'm going to be using a cylinder. So collision shape in the top right in shape. Click cylinder. And the default size is actually fine. It's 2 meters in height and 0.5 meter in radius. And again, we'll hold down Ctrl and Shift and drag up the collision shape so it's nice and on the origin. I'm going to be adding an empty to the player. So right click player, add child node, node 3D. This is going to be our visuals. So I'm going to go visuals, and in here we're going to drop the model. So go into your assets folder, models, and the mixable base. Drop it into visuals. Forward in Godot and many game engines is Z negative. So you can see here on the top you have your Z axis, and the negative one is going to be the forward. So our player is actually facing the wrong way now. So I'll just select the base, hold down Control, and rotate 180. Here in the top, here in the bottom left, you could see the degrees. So that looks about right. Let's actually scale down the collision shape a little bit. I'll make it 0.3 in radius. Yeah, that's a little better. Now let's add our camera to this. For this, we're going to need a camera mount. I'll show you why in a second. But for now, let's just add a node 3D to player. Call this camera mount. I'm going to move this up. This is going to be the rotation point of the camera. So when you move around your mouse, on what point the camera is going to rotate. And I'm going to put it right in her chest. Yeah, like that. And I'll add the camera. So now you can decide how you want your camera to look. You can click preview here in the top left to see what it's going to see. So this one is going to be too much, in my opinion, it's going to be too much behind her, so she's blocking the scene. So I'm going to move it up a little. This one is kind of like World of Warcraft, like over the head, a wide view. I'm going to move it up to the side a little. Preview again. Move it in. Yeah, I like it more like that. Like PUBG, Fortnite. Over the shoulder. Alright, now if you grab this camera mount and you rotate it, around, you can see what I meant with the rotation point. And up and down. And we're going to want to do this with our mouse in game. So let's set this up. I'll quickly save this scene. And to our player controller, I'm going to add a script and drop it in our scripts folder. Player is fine. And we want this template enabled, the basic movement. Create. And now let's save this. The template adds some basic logic for moving and jumping, which is really nice. We can use this. Right now it's using the arrow keys, but we're going to change that. I'm actually going to drop in the player in our main scene. So in the tab here, go back to main, 3D, click the world right there, and drag and drop in our player. And now we can quickly test this. So you can click the play icon on the top right, select current. And now when you move with the arrow keys, you can see you can already move around your player. And it collides with the boxes. So that's a very nice start. Let's set up the logic. Alright, let's start with the mouse movement. So we'll go into our script, into our player script, and we'll first capture the mouse. It means the mouse stays within the window and doesn't move and isn't shown. So we'll go func_ready. This function is run when the player is ready, so at the start. We'll go input.mousemode equals input.mousemode captured. And now when we run this, you can see our mouse is no longer visible and it isn't moving outside the screen. Alt tab and stop this. And now let's get the mouse motion. So we'll go func_input event, like this. And in here we're going to check if the input is a mouse movement. So we'll go if event is input event mouse motion. Then we're going to rotate our player on the y-axis for the x motion. So we'll go rotate_y. And we want these angles in radians and not in degrees. So we'll go degrees to radians with this function. And we'll get our event relative x. So this is our mouse movement on the x-axis. With this function, we're going to convert this from degrees to radians. And then we're going to rotate our player by those degrees. We're converting to radiant because the rotate function takes radians, but if we just put in 1 radian per pixel, we're going to spin out of control. So 1 degree is better, and it's easier to adjust for mouse sensitivity. So let's run this now. And now you can see we can look around. It's too fast and it's inverted. So we'll go back in here and we'll just add a minus in front of this, like that. And then we'll at the top variable sense horizontal equals 0.5. And then we can go inside of the degrees to radian function, multiply our x motion by sense horizontal. It's going to be our mouse sensitivity on the horizontal axis. Let's run it again. Now it's the right way around and a little slower, like that. Now let's do our y-axis, so up and down. I'll go into the player scene. And we're not going to be rotating the whole player for the Y, because then we just clip into the floor. But we're going to use this camera mount, which we added. So let's go into our script. Click and drag the camera mount into the code and holding down Control. This way Godot automatically creates a variable for the camera mount. Then we'll go in here and we'll rotate X, again degrees to radians, event dot relative Y this time because we want up and down, and we're going to be wanting to rotate the camera mount. So in front of this we'll add camera mount dot. Let's run it. And now we can look up and down. It's inverted again. So I'm going to add a minus again. And I'm also going to create a sensitivity variable for the vertical. So I'll just copy and paste the horizontal and rename this to vertical. And again, we'll multiply the mouse movement by the sensitivity. And now this is right. I can move up and down, left and right. It's still way too strong. I'm actually gonna export these vars. And what that means is that they'll show up as variables in the editor, so we can just adjust them way easier. So in front of this, I'm gonna go add export. We'll do the same here. And now when we go into our main scene in 3D, we'll let the lighting update. You can see we have the variables here, so we can tweak them really easily. I'll set them a little lower. It feels way nicer. Now, let's change the arrow keys to the WASD keys. In here you can see the input direction is coming from the UI left, UI right, UI up, UI down, which are the arrow keys. So we'll add our own inputs. We do this by going into project, project settings, input map. And here in add new, we're going to type the name of our inputs. So we'll go forward, backward, left and right. And then by clicking the plus and pressing the button we want, go W, backward, D or S, left, A, right, D. Close that out. And now in here we can swap these for left, right, forward, backward. And now when we run this, we can move around our player and look around. Now, of course, she doesn't have any animations yet. So we'll add those. To add the animations, go into visuals, the Mixamo base, you're going to right click it and make local. This will expose the animation player, which we'll need. Now we're going to drag and drop the animation player into the code to access it, again holding down Control. Now we have our animation player. And we're actually going to need to fix these animations a little bit. So go into 3D, animation player, into animations. And here in the drop down you can see all the animations on this character. We're going to be going into walking and we'll click this little loop icon. That way at the end of the animation it will play again. We'll also do this one for running, make that a loop, and for idle. I already said it, but yeah. Alright. Then in our scripts we'll set up the logic for this animating. So we'll copy the animation player variable, and here in the if direction, this means if our player has a direction to walk. So in here the player is walking, we can go animation player dot play walking. Now this is going to call the animation player every frame to run the walking animation, which is not what we want. So we're going to check if animation player dot is current animation is not equal. So exclamation point equals is not equal to walking, play the animation walking. So if our player is currently not walking, we'll start walking. And down here, we'll copy this logic. So copy these 2 lines of code and put them down here. And we're going to do the same for idling. So if we're currently not idle, play idle. And this is the logic for when the player is not walking. All right, let's run this. Now you can see our idle animation is playing. And when we walk, our walking animation is playing. You can see she's sliding across the floor. This is because the movement speed is set too high relative to the animation. So Alt-Tab, stop this one. I'm going to set the speed to 2.8. Let's run it again. You can see that's much better. It's actually a little slow now. Maybe 3. You're going to have to tweak this depending on your animations, but if you're using the same one, it's going to be somewhere around 3. All right. A problem we're having now is when we move sideways, our character doesn't look sideways. So let's fix this. To fix this, we're going to need our visual node. So we'll drag and drop our visuals, holding down Control at the top. Then we'll copy this visuals variable. And here in our walking logic, so if direction, we'll add this line, visuals.look at position plus direction. Now, what does this do? This is going to rotate our visuals, so not our actual player, but just the visual element, so just the model, in the direction that we're walking. I'll show you what it does. So now our character is actually looking at the direction in which he's walking. But you can see this other bug. When we just move around our mouse, the character does this little turn thing. And some games use this, the character turning with the mouse as you're looking around. I prefer to not have it like this, to have the character stay static until we move. I'll show you how to do that. We're actually gonna rotate our visuals in the opposite direction of the camera, so it looks like it's static. Sounds complicated, it's not. We'll just go in here in input event mouse motion. We'll go visuals dot rotate y, and we'll copy this amount by which we're rotating the player, and we'll just remove the negative. Let's run it again. Now you can see our visuals are static, but as soon as we start walking, the visuals match with our walking. And then again, static. And when we're walking, they're bound to the camera. So this is the most basic form of a third-person controller. If this is what you were looking for, then there you go. You can end right here. I'm going to be adding some more features to this character just to show you. I'll be adding running and a kicking animation. The running logic is actually really easy. We'll just create 2 new variables for walking and running speed. So I'll go at the top of my code for walking speed, set this equal to 3.0. For running speed, and set this equal to 5.0. Then we'll quickly map out the shift key in the input settings. So go into project settings, input map, run, add an action for running, click the plus icon and press shift. All right. And then in our physics process at the top, I'm going to be checking if we're holding down the running action. So if input with a capital dot is action pressed run. So if we're holding the shift key, our speed is going to be equal to running speed. And if we're not holding the shift key, our speed is going to be equal to walking speed. And now we'll have to change our speed variable. Sorry. And now we have to change our speed variable to a variable. It's currently a const, which means it can't be changed. It's just a constant value. So we'll change it to var. And now if we run this, you'll see you can walk really fast. And all we have to do now is play the right animation. So let's do that. In here, in our direction logic, our logic for when we're walking, you can see it's playing the walking animation. We're just going to copy these two lines below here and swap walking for running. And then at the top, we're going to have to check if we're running or walking to decide what animation we're going to run. And we could check the speed, but it's not a very nice way of doing it. So we just set a new variable var running equals false. It's going to be a Boolean. And we'll copy this. And here in the logic where we change the speed, based on if we're holding shift, we just say running equals true and running equals false. So then down here in the direction, we can check if we're running, play the walking animation, we'll swap it around. Else, play the running animation, but that's backwards. So we'll just copy this, paste it in the top one, copy this, and paste it in the bottom one. So now let's run this. And now you can see we're walking when we're walking, and we're running when we're running. You can see the animations start and stop abruptly. That's because there's no blend time set. A blend time is basically the time it takes for animations to transition. It's really easy to set up though. So we'll just go into our animation player here in the player scene. And down here in playback options, you can set the default blend time and we'll set it to 0.2 seconds. And now if we run it again, you can see there's a little transition between animations. Looks much smoother. Alright, I'll also add the kicking animation. I'll add this one because it's a locked animation, meaning when we start kicking, you can no longer walk. And then when you end kicking, you regain control of the character. So let's create a variable for locking our player. So for is locked, we'll set it equal to false. Copy this variable. And down here in move and slide, we'll go if exclamation point is locked. So if we're not locked, you can move the character, and we'll also not rotate the player. So also in here we go, if exclamation point is locked, visuals.lookAt. So it means if the character is not locked, so if it's free, we'll look at their direction, and otherwise we don't, so we're stuck. Then let's add a key for kicking. So go into project settings, input map, kick, and let's add it. And I'll just use F. You can use whatever you want. Close this out. And then we're going to go into our process. We're going to go if input is action just pressed, so just at the start of the press, kick. Then we're going to check if we're not already kicking. So if animation player dot current animation is not equal to kick animation player dot play kick, and we'll also is locked true. So we're checking if the kick key is pressed. When it's pressed, we're checking if we're not already kicking, and if we're not, we'll kick, and we'll lock our character so we can no longer walk and look around. We can look around, but we can no longer walk and rotate the character. Now let's run this, and there's going to be a bug, but I'll show you. So we kick, our character locks in. You can see a little bit of the kicking animation playing, but then it goes back to idle and it never unlocks. So let me show you why. It's because we set the locked, we never unset locked, so we're going to stay locked forever. And we play the kicking animation, but in here this logic for not moving is going off, and we're playing the idle animation. So how do we fix this? It's actually quite easy. We're going to have to stop running animations while the character is locked. Because right now, even though the character is locked and playing the kicking animation, it's going back to idle or running, depending if you're holding shift. So we're going to add this condition, if the character is not locked, to the animation logic, also down here. And here you can see duplicate code in the same space, so we can just remove this condition and move them into the same block. So you can see if locked now contains the visual lock and the animation lock. Let's run it again. Now we can run and walk around, and when we kick, and after that we can do nothing because we're never unlocked. And to fix that, we're going to go here at the top of this physics process. I'm going to go if animation player is playing, and we're going to add an exclamation point. So if the animation player is not playing, so we're done with kicking or any other animation we're locked into, is locked equals false, meaning we are now no longer locked. So now we can walk around, we can kick, and after that we're unlocked again. So you can walk up to someone, kick, and during the kick we cannot move our player or slide around. We can just kick these boxes. So that's our basic third-person controller setup. There's a lot more you can do with this. I have a project where I build a shooter with this. I'll show some footage now. And of course there's a million things you can do with a third-person controller. If you want to see something more specific feature or specific game type using its third-person controller, or any other feature you might want to add, let me know. I'm always making tutorials, so I'll be glad to do one. So yeah, I hope you learned something. If you make something awesome, link me. I'd love to see it. Alright, thank you.